Thank you. Good evening, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. I know I've given a very tough task. It's end of the day, so everyone is trying to rush home or have some fun, right? So I make myself short and sweet. So thank you, the Startup Buddy, and of course Canadian Embassy, organizing this event. Of course, thanks to GeoWorks to host this event. Myself, Vice Chairman and Head of ESG for Smart City Network. Smart City, probably let me run my slides.
Yeah, the clicker, right in there.
Yeah, sure. I think, first of all, great appreciation to all the startups, which they pitched on a different technology space, and particularly on the smart city development. So my title today, I'm going to share with you guys a few information. Is not only smart, it has to be sustainable, right? So how the technology can help to transform cities to be more sustainable. So very quick about Smart City Network here in Asia. So we focus purely on connecting the dots between different ecosystem players in ASEAN level as part of the thought leadership or business opportunity engagement, or even for that matter, that how we can able to provide education. And that is highly needed as we see how the cities are transforming in ASEAN level. So of course, when ASEAN was set up in 2017, although it is a very young organization, over the last 5 to 6 years, we've grown from Singapore to regional and to the global level. So fortunately, I was there last year in Poland to sign up MOU with the UN Habitat and CIF. CIF is the City Investment Facility under UN Habitat. So I met with, of course, Madam Maimuna, who was the ex-mayor of Penang, and now she is the Under-Secretary General for UN Habitat. So the idea behind this partnership is as an implementing partner for UN Habitat in upholding new urban agenda across ASEAN cities. Basically looking at raising awareness, building capability, and enabling commitment where we can build a bankable projects. Ultimately, those projects can be implemented in transforming cities on ASEAN level. Of course, many of you know smart cities means it's always start with the Barcelona, right? I had opportunity to work with the Barcelona city director, the first smart city director, Josep Ferreira, long time ago. And ultimately, then it transformed from Barcelona to many cities in Europe and many other parts of the world. And of course, Singapore being one of the, actually in ASEAN, is the #1 smart city, and global level stands at #7. So you can see from here, in ASEAN or even Asia Pacific, Smart City Network only entity being the implementing partner for UN Habitat and CAF as of now. And we work closely with many other organizations like EMF, Think City, that is based out of Malaysia as well. So I think everyone should know that today is June 5th, World Environmental Day. And it's very, very important day. Literally, it is a 50th year. World Environment Day was formed in 1973. So we are crossing half a century. And and we talk about a lot of technology today, very meant for built environment or smart city or city development is concerned. But in my point of view, I think it should address at least these 5 key elements in the context of smart city development. One is about making sure any technology or any solutions we adapt, it is aligning with the SDG goals. There are 17 goals from no poverty to the partnership, right? The second one, making sure that it is mainstreaming the climate action, because we are in a tipping point at this point in time. As we go home, today, and making sure that you can carry some messages and you could implement in your work processes. Third one, making sure that the infrastructure resiliency. There are projects we spoke about today, talk about security, resilience, safety, and sustainability. The fourth one, has to be action-oriented collaboration, not just talk, has to be really get into action. I was just talking to her that the success of this today event is when we leave these 4 walls, can we implement something? The last but not least, making sure that it improves the quality of life of the people. So today, this is the latest report from UN as well as UN Habitat and IPCC. We are on the verge of crossing 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2050, and we could even go to 3 degrees Celsius by end of this century at the current rate of what we are doing. So definitely, which you can easily see when you are outside. And I was talking to people around the world, and they can able to see the ambient temperature rise and the impact to the quality of life of the people. And as we talk about smart city, almost 76% of carbon emission today arising from the urban development. So that means cities have a huge opportunity to reduce carbon footprint, enable sustainability. So this is the overview of urbanizing the world at this point in time. So if you look at it, almost today 56% of population lives in urban world. By end of this 2050, it could shoot up to 68%. That almost adding a 2.2 billion people into the cities. Having said that, almost 1 billion people live on slums. So that means you really need to build a lot of houses, affordable houses, shopping malls, office towers, resorts, hotels across the world. So if you look at it, there is a study from IEA. Today, the global built environment is about 280 billion square meter. By end of 2050, it could become double, almost 500 billion square meter. So imagine that we are going to add another 230 billion square meter built environment space. So built environment accountable for 37% of carbon footprint globally, from construction to the operation to the decommissioning. So making sure that sustainability is fully taken care in any kind of built environment, whether it's a home or office or a resort or a logistic warehouse. So I think here innovation and technology can play a huge role to making sure that the built environment can be more sustainable, from a development of blueprint to the construction, commissioning, operation, ultimately to the decommissioning of the asset. So the total life cycle carbon of the asset can be easily better managed if you embrace a right technology in place, whether it is a Envision AI, or it could be Technobuild, or any other startup which today whatever presented, it is rightly applicable to any built environment, whether it's office building or a city. The market for smart cities, annually it could be $500 billion, and it could be accelerating very heavily as cities transform. So there are many ways you can adapt in the built environment space. One simple thing is actually enabling IoT and making sure that the data sets within the built environment can be easily mapped, analyzed, and making sure that gives the right insights for the built environment people, so that it can be better managed, automated fault detection, reduce energy demand, energy consumption. Ultimately, it gives the cost saving. In any buildings, particularly in ASEAN, for example, tropical climate, 70% of energy goes to cooling and ventilation. And most of the buildings are inefficiently constructed and inefficiently operated. So based on my experience the last 30 years, right, almost deployed more than 300 different projects. My last assignment was managing a 40 million square feet of integrated resort space. So 2013 to 2021, almost over 8 years, we cut down 62% of carbon footprint, just doing simply energy efficiency initiative. Of course, that can be short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals. But you can easily do that. I can give you one example that I almost changed 1 million light bulbs. 1 million light bulb equal to 25 million kilowatt hour energy reduction on a 40 million square feet of rail space. And no brainer. And improving one of the largest district cooling plant, 100,000 ton, gives almost 25 million kilowatt hour energy reduction, and ventilation gives 80 million kilowatt hour of energy reduction. So any built environment, whether large, mid or small, doesn't really matter, and there are opportunities, and these are all easy to do, and most important thing is you really need to have a right technology, right funding, and right business case. As we speak about energy and water, actually the third biggest problem in the world is a waste. And energy, water, gas, all metered. Unfortunately, waste is not metered until today. So managing waste is the biggest challenge, right? Of course, having said that, there are a lot of technologies available today and which can be easily deployed and enabling the waste management to be more successful. Reducing waste, recycling waste, repurposing, and last but not least, get into the waste to energy. So that is what we call circular economy, right? So I just want to share with you a story of Singapore, right, since we are here. Right? Singapore, even when it started after, since 1960 to, 2018, the fundamental of Singapore development is focused on two things. One is the sustainability and ultimately smart nation. So when I talk about sustainability, three front. One is about economic sustainability, because you have to be. If it is not economic, because we all here, although I represent Smart City Network, which is NGO, but it has to be economically sustainable for you to live. So economic sustainability followed by environmental sustainability, and last but not least, social inclusivity. I think that's a paramount of Singapore development. From 1960, when it's a HDB housing is formed, almost 80% of population in Singapore lives across 12,000 buildings of HDBs, almost 1.2 million households, right? And then of course Changi Airport in 1981. Then you can see Marina Bay Sands, all the way from Sports Hub. The last but not least, the Punggol Digital District. I will touch a little bit on PDD in my few slides later. So the fundamental of smart city development is part of the three pillars of smart nation. The three pillars of smart nation focusing around digital society, digital economy, and digital government. Today, I would say that in Singapore, end-to-end, any kind of activity within the government space and public space, 99% is digitally operated. So it's more, I would say, also reducing a lot of unwanted paperwork, right, and speed up the whole processes. And you want to set up a company here in Singapore, you can set up in 24 hours, right? You can set up a company in $2 if you're a local, right? No big drama. So as part of smart city development, there are a few key areas. One is about Smart Nation Initiative, which was launched in 2014 by our Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong. And of course, Green Building Master Plan, which was published in 2005, and then it took multiple shapes, 2005, 2008, 2009, 2014, 2018, 2021. So new Green Master Plan being published just a couple of years ago, and making sure that more and more stringent measures are built in to the built environment. The third one, of course, LTS initiative, that is purely on the smart mobility and reducing the carbon footprint on the transportation. In Singapore, out of 54 tons of carbon, 54 metric ton of carbon, almost 27% goes to transportation. So it's a huge opportunity for Singapore to reduce the carbon footprint on a transport sector perspective. And of course, PDD, Punggol Digital District, and last but not least, NRF, which funds several initiatives. So it started with Smart Nation in a many aspects. If you look at from identity infrastructure, that is a national identity, followed by payment. There are many payment gateways are built in Singapore to ease the payment processes. Then IoT infrastructure, that is as part of the smart city and smart nation and sensor network to monitor whether it's the CCTV cameras or temperature, weather, or you name it, anything else, right? And service infrastructure, more from urban mobility. And Singapore is aiming to deploy almost 60,000 EV charging stations by end of 2030. Because in Singapore, after 2030, you can't buy ICE engines. So only EV cars, and probably future will be hydrogen cars. The last but not least, on the moment of life, that is more for health and well-being of the people. And as we speak about smart city, sustainable city, energy, water waste, right? Climate change, cyber security. One of the key threat for the humanity right now is mental well-being, which not many people or many platforms being spoken about it. Something you really need to care about it. So Singapore also planned for net zero plan by 2050. So there is a huge roadmap. So I just want to touch on three things. One is the Singapore 2030 Green Plan, which touch on 5 key pillars from built environment to the city in nature, green government and all kind of stuff. Of course, green procurement as well. Then 2050 net zero plan by Energy Market Authority, where energy mix, because today Singapore draws 95% energy from natural gas, 3% from waste to energy through the Tuasau incineration plant, and of course a couple of percentage from renewable energy. Today almost more than half a gigawatt of solar PV installed. By end of 2030 we are aiming for 2 gigawatt. But having said that, Singapore opened up a lot of green corridors to procure clean energy from neighboring nations, whether it's Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Indonesia and Malaysia as well, and ultimately moving across from other countries including Australia, right? And Building Construction Authority, which is meant for all the built environment, launched the 80 by 80 by 80 rule. So what does it mean? That 80% of the buildings should be green certified, green mark platinum, like LEED in the US or BREEAM in the UK. And another 80% of the buildings should be highly energy efficient, and the last 80% of buildings should be super low energy building. So that's the pathway for reducing a carbon footprint. Yes?
Quick question, does it include existing buildings or is this building moving forward?
Including existing building. So by 2030, at least 85% of the building, 80% of the buildings should be green mark certified. That is the goal. Today we are almost 56% of the buildings are green certified. So Punggol Digital Districts, another huge initiative by Singapore government, almost $2 billion investment to drive digitalization in township development. So you can read a lot of information on the publicly available, but I just want to touch on a few things. So it is also garnered almost half a billion dollars on technology and innovation space, and of course it will generate few thousand jobs. And last but not least, Singapore continuously rated as a smart city world as a #1 on ASEAN level and #7 I think in the global level. So with this I end my presentation by the new urban agenda gives clear guidance on how well planned and well managed urbanization can be a transformative force to accelerate towards sustainable development goals. It has inspired new solutions that make cities key players in addressing climate emergency, managing migration flow, and fighting pandemics and other global challenges. So these are the words from Executive Director and Under Secretary General for UN Habitat. So with this I end my presentation. Open for any Q&A. Thank you. I hope I'm on time.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Syed, so I think Singapore is a great example because a lot of initiatives are government driven.
Yep.
Which I think, if the planet is going to do something, it's going to have to be government driven. So I think the UK is starting to do that as well, and a few places. How much of that do you see in Asia besides Singapore? And how much government initiatives are forcing the built environment, for instance, to go digital and those kind of things?
I think you really spot on it. I mean, it has to be government driven, because when we talk about sustainability or ESG, has to be top driven, and then bottom of engagement, right? Singapore is the really forefront in that context, looking from a long-term strategic plan. So besides Singapore, you can see that many other cities or many other governments in ASEAN really working on it. For example, like Vietnam. So where if you look at it in an ASEAN level, Vietnam is the highest solar PV deployed country, right? And then of course Philippines taking up more steam in that, and equally Indonesia promote a lot of innovation, digital startups, right? Globally, they are one of the biggest startup ecosystem. Bandung, for example, the new capital, right? And equally Thailand is taking a huge step, and Macau, for example, in North Asia, right, also taking a huge step in it. But in Macau, I used to live there for 8 years, and largely from a private sector, then followed by government take more role, more leading role. And I can compare to Singapore to Hong Kong. So Hong Kong, I mean, Singapore is more government driven, right? But in Hong Kong is more of a private driven. Okay, that's kind of opposite. But I think Hong Kong doing equally an interesting job, right? And particularly SFI, I mean, Sustainable Finance Initiative. Hong Kong taking a much more lead role. But now Singapore is really picking up, and particularly COVID and COVID gave a huge opportunity for Singapore to take more lead on the green finance, green bond, and that's another happening. Yes.
In the context of creating
Yes, sir.
Smart and specifically sustainable green city, what areas do you think are highly important but currently extremely overlooked or underappreciated?
I think I would say more related to stakeholder engagement, engaging people. Because it's not that you want to build something but without engaging people. That's why many of the smart cities never been successful. Like there are billion-dollar projects in Canada, right, been shunted because it is not properly engaged. Many other projects have been never been successful. So in my point of view, that if you don't engage people, engage ecosystem properly, then it doesn't work. So that is most of the time it is not properly done. I was just talking about it. Technology is not an issue. There's lots of technology already. I mean today 4 startups already presented, and there are many already available. And so not having a right business model, not engaging people. Third is actually not allocating right funding. Okay, or access to finance. This is one of the biggest challenge, both in developed world, developing world, and emerging world. Okay, because last year when I was at World Urban Forum, I was sitting into many mayors' talks, and most of the mayors say that got a lot of nice projects. Their problem is getting the right funding. On the other end, there's a lot of money. Money is not getting the right home. Yes, Abhinav.
So, sticking on your funding piece, the carbon, I guess the net zero initiative, there's a lot of development required in the carbon markets to be efficient, so that the price of carbon is set, it can be traded, and so people are more driven from the funding side, right? Where do you see Singapore positioning itself in carbon trading and price of carbon markets?
Very good question. So today in Singapore, 1 ton of carbon is at $5, but 6 months down the line, it will be $25. Okay, so the carbon tax is imposed significantly, and by end of the decade, it could shoot up to $80 to $100 per ton. So if you look at globally, compliance market, carbons are traded anything between $60 to $80, right? Even go to $100 some context. And the voluntary carbon market below $10, $2 to $10, right? So Singapore, last year at the Parliament session, our DPM, Lawrence Wong actually announced that carbon tax will be imposed significantly. So this will put a lot of pressure on high carbon emitting entities to take action and making sure that they really reduce the carbon footprint. So that is on the carbon tax point of view. And carbon trading we have 2 exchanges here to trade carbon, and equally NEA, National Environmental Agency, is building a international carbon credit registry to making sure that the carbon credit procured are trustable, right? Where blockchain will be another element to come in to help, because there is a lot of double accounting of carbon credits, and that's literally puts negativity, right? Anyone want to disclose, right? So Singapore is already working on that, right? And besides Singapore, the trading of carbon already happening in Malaysia. Last year, Malaysia announced VCM, and Indonesia carbon taxed around $2 per ton, if I'm not wrong. And Vietnam carbon trading will come in 2028. They are already working on, right? So of course, many other countries will slowly pick up to impose tax on the carbon and facilitate carbon trading as well. Any more questions?
What's the coolest technology? I know you've seen a lot of different techs. What's the last coolest technology you've heard of? It doesn't have to be today's startups. I know I'm biased.
No, the coolest tech, I mean, there are many. I think a couple I can say. One, I was
I'd like to complete maybe the one that had the most impact.
Yeah.
Yeah, the most impact, see, I was talking to Abhinav as well, as Abhi as well. The impact only based, because from a technology, software, I mean the digital space point of view, right, when it is properly integrated with the hardware, engineering aspect of it, and enabling a proper business model, then it creates a huge impact, right? And for example, like look at light bulbs, right? 20 years ago, LED exists, but nobody wants to change it, right? Today, you can't buy incandescent lights. Okay, so that's how it changed. So cost of product becomes so lower, and ultimately it becomes more efficient, right? Equally, solar PV, right? Solar PV 20 years ago, 40 years ago, solar PV existed, but adoption rate is very low, and today solar PV cost significantly dropped, and adoption rate become higher, right? And so I think in my point of view, impact is all about business model, right? I mean, as I was sharing with you guys, 1 million light bulb replacement, right? So it's average payback anything between 6 months to 18 months. And the company's acceptable rate is a 5-year based on DCF, discounted cash flow model. That means it's a no-brainer, right? The ventilation system I put forward to upgrade, $18 million project is just less than 18 months return, but that still operates, and company continues to enjoy cost saving and carbon reduction until the system until end of the lifespan. That's about 15 to 20 years, right? So it's solar thermal, for example, which is unnoticed here in this part of the world, right? Solar thermal is a huge opportunity compared to solar PV. So yeah, but the coolest technology, since you asked that, so I come across two. One is the carbon capture technology, not for the outdoor carbon capture. This is actually an indoor carbon capture, which was from Finland. So I was doing, because I was assigned to do a mentorship for them for 3 months. It's a pro bono. I do a lot of national work. Okay, so I come across, that's really, really a good technology. And I try to help them to reposition their business model so that they can be more competitive, because it's very expensive and the adoption could be very challenging. So that is one thing I came up. Another one is actually called Concrete AI. They also work with the GeoWorks. Because concrete is one of the highest carbon footprint across built environment, right? Embodied carbon, all kind of stuff. So in the concrete manufacturing, so after you manufacture a concrete, you have to do the tensile strength testing, before like all the precast. So these people, the two graduates from NUS came out with this digitalization methodology to monitor with a sensor, and then they can measure the temperature and strength calculation that ultimately improve productivity, number one. Number two, also minimize significant amount of concrete wastages, because when they do the testing, they are wasting almost 5 to 8% of concrete, so they can able to reduce the. So that's another technology I came out. Very simple but impactful, and really addressing the real intent of the market, which is one of the highest polluter in the world. Okay, thank you.